In one of your recent sermons in our Bring Me Another Jar series, it was the Filled to Flow sermon. And before we even jump into this, I'll say that this sermon is on our YouTube channel, and you should definitely go back and listen to it, because the things I'm about to hit on, you actually did elaborate on pretty well. But there were some specific application questions that I had on it. So you started talking about in that sermon about empathy and about how the world tells us to love someone well. You have empathy towards them, and you begin to carry what they're feeling, and that's like step one, or at least it's a big part of what it means to love someone. And you kind of contrasted that with intercession and saying actually what we're called to is to intercede, is intercession for people. It's the empathy that we're called to, is to carry what God has asked us to carry, to yoke with him. And obviously I'm recapping, and it's all there on YouTube. But my question was along the lines of, okay, so I've never really seen empathy like contrasted with intercession, or compared to, maybe not contrasted, but like, hey, this is a better alternative. This is actually what you're called to. I've never seen those two words together. And my question would be along the lines of, so having intercession as a response to what we see in the world around us, in those who invite us into their lives, like, what does that look like? How do we actually step in with intercession versus empathy? How do we do that?
Yeah. Great question. That's great. So I'll say a few things, and then maybe you can even ask some follow-up questions to see if I'm going on the right track here.
Yeah.
So, and my allergies are still bad, so excuse me.
That's all right.
One thing I think that we have to start with is, what were we talking about by the time I got there? Because that's important. What we were talking about was coming off of a couple of weeks. Okay, so we got to we need to be empty this year so we can come to God.
Right.
But being empty isn't the whole point. We've got to get filled.
Right.
And so the second week of the year, we talked about being yoked to Jesus and getting filled with him.
Right.
And being yoked to him because his yoke is easy and his burden is light.
Yes.
And so the message you're talking about was the third week.
Yes.
Was filled to flow. So I get empty, but I'm not empty. Empty's not the end. I'm empty to get filled. And now I'm not just filled to be full. I'm filled to flow with the life of God. And we were talking about the woman at the well.
Yes.
So I'm not critiquing you. I'm saying this. I wasn't talking about empathy, just wholesale empathy, or talking about empathy just for the sake of empathy. I was trying. That's the point. Wasn't empathy. The point was walking with Jesus, and how do we be filled to flow, and all of this thing.
That's great.
So the reason that I talked about empathy is not to say that empathy was bad. And again, if somebody doesn't know what we're talking about, I talked about it for about 10 minutes during that message. I think it started at like the 35, 40-minute mark.
Totally.
So you can go back and listen to that. But it's not a knock on empathy. It's about proper placement of empathy.
Right. Okay.
So that's context of the conversation we're having. Is it's actually not. I'm not having the conversation of intercession versus empathy.
Great.
That's not what I'm talking about in that contrasting sense.
Right.
To say, we're called to one and not the other.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
That's good.
And empathy's great, and I said that.
Yes.
And empathy's a great thing. It's more about proper placement of things.
Right. Okay.
Because what we're going for is to be filled with Jesus and then flow with Jesus.
Right.
So there's a lot of pressure that we're all under in the world that we live in to have empathy for everything and everybody.
Right.
And we are, whatever, we're under that pressure. And that's hard because empathy is really hard.
Right.
And empathy is a heavy thing.
Right.
By nature. What empathy is it's taking in the feelings of somebody else.
Right.
So sympathy is, I hear what you're going through and I'm sorry that's happening, and I'm sorry that you feel that way.
Right.
Which is amazing. Empathy is sort of the deeper next step of that, which is like, I'm going into those feelings with you. And so now I'm entering into that.
Right.
to take it on inside of me, and I'm understanding it at that level. Mm-hmm. So, in psychology and all that sort of thing, like empathy's that's incredible.
Right.
But we need to understand that that's, incredible and valuable things are usually rare.
Right.
And so, and that's heavy and that's weighty to go there. And so, there's a small handful of people that I believe that I should be disposed towards empathy for.
Right. Okay.
Like mainly my wife.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then maybe my kids. And then depending on maybe personal capacity, other people past that.
Right.
So empathy is a beautiful thing in the right place at the right time.
Right.
So again, I'm not knocking empathy.
Totally.
Like I need to be able to go there with people.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I'm talking about, so again, why are we having this whole conversation?
Right.
There's a lot of pressure that the world, I think, tells us, and that whatever we hear a lot, or at least, okay, I'll say I've seen this a lot and heard this a lot, and I have felt this a lot and been told this a lot. So I'm not going to speak for everybody else.
Right.
That the most loving thing that I can do is to have empathy for someone, but then also therefore the most loving thing I can do to the world is to have empathy for the world, anybody and everybody.
Right.
And I'm supposed to be loving.
Yes.
Because I'm a Christian, and I'm
Right.
supposed to love my neighbor, and everybody's my neighbor. And the most loving thing I can do is have empathy. So the most loving thing I can do is have empathy for my neighbor, who is everyone.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about.
Right. And that's where my question comes
Yes.
in is, okay, I'm told everywhere that I should have that as my first and even sometimes only response. That is the only right way to respond. And you're saying, no, as a part of love. I think you literally said, I wrote it down, empathy is a part of love, but it's most often not the whole thing, and definitely not the first thing in our response to what we see.
Right.
And so that's where then my question comes in is like, okay, but where does intercession fit in to that? Or what is... I don't naturally think of, okay, empathy is not step one, intercession. What does that look like? And you talked a lot about, let's be yoked with Jesus in that sermon. And you did go into some specifics on what that looked like. But in the, I have a neighbor, or I have an actual person in my life that is going through something. How do I get to the place where I'm interceding on them when I see or hear or even am invited into pain or whatever they're going through? What does it look like? I don't know what the term to use, but what's the formula to get to intercession?
Yeah,
how do I drive myself to intercession versus carrying something I shouldn't carry?
Right. Totally. So I'm gonna back up again.
Yeah.
Just I hope. So again, yes, these are really good questions. So everything we've said is it paints the picture that empathy is the goal in all things all the time.
Sure.
And what I hear from people is what I need from you is empathy. Because empathy is love, and I need you to love me, and you're a Christian who's supposed to love me. And so therefore for me to tell you you're a good Christian, you have to love me, which means you have to have empathy for me.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so the whole point that I'm making is that the goal of our lives is to flow with Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
Not live up to whatever definition or expectation of anybody else or anything else.
That's good.
My number one call as a Christian is to live yoked to Jesus.
Right.
In salvation, I come to him and I get emptied out of my sin and death.
Oh, man.
And then I get filled with his righteousness. And now my life is to flow with him.
Yes.
I don't flow with the principle of love because the world needs love.
Yes, you're right.
I flow with God because the world needs God.
Yes.
And the way I do that is by being yoked to him.
Right.
And walking with him. And not yoked to him in the sense, like we talked about, yoked to him in the sense that he's the strong ox.
Right.
I'm yoked to him meaning I follow him.
Right.
I'm his apprentice. I'm his sidekick. I'm his disciple. He is. I am his follower.
Yeah.
He is not my disciple. He is not my genie.
Right.
He is not my accessory. He's the one leading the way here. And I am, how did I say it? strictly but flexibly yoked to him.
Right.
And what that means is that it's strict. Like I can't go anywhere.
Right.
But flexible in the sense of I have got to bend with him where he bends and all of those sorts of things. So the whole point I'm making is that we are not called to be empathetic.
Right.
We are called to be Christians.
Yes. Okay.
So I'm trying to help us get free from subconsciously living to please men.
Right.
And Paul says, if I live to please men,
Right.
I'm no longer even a bondservant of Christ.
Right.
So that's why this matters.
Yes.
And that's why
Good point.
that's what we're getting after
Yes.
here is, okay, I am responsible unto Jesus
Right.
and to do the things he's called me to do.
Yes.
I'm supposed to be yoked to him.
Right.
As someone who's yoked to him,
Yeah.
there will be times where I express love towards someone with empathy.
Right.
But
Right.
it's not a formula. Like, again, we always say this, the system is rigged.
Yep.
Jesus has rigged this whole system. I cannot walk with him without actually walking with him.
Right.
I can't get the formula. Oh, a Christian is loving, love is empathy. So now I run around and I give empathy. And then at the end of the day, I know I was a good Christian because
Right.
I gave people empathy.
Right.
No. Jesus
Yeah,
says,
that's a good
abide
point.
in me, because
Right.
apart from me, you can do nothing.
Right.
You don't bear fruit without walking
Yes.
with me. And I just do what I see the Father doing.
Right.
And I say what the Father's saying.
Goodness. Yes.
Okay, so this is what we're after. And so I'm after Jesus, being yoked to Jesus, because I want to bear fruit. And he tells me that as I'm yoked to him, his burden is easy and his yoke is easy and his burden
Right,
is light.
right.
And empathy in itself is a very heavy burden.
Right.
Okay.
That's
So-
where the conversation.
now we can start answering the question.
Right. No, but that's really helpful though, because I started out with the question, empathy versus intercession. You're like, no.
Yeah.
It is responding to man or responding to God. Basically, it's like no. What is where are you coming from and where are you headed? In this?
Right. So I'm trying to get us all back to
Yes.
what we're called to is
Right.
Christianity. We're called to being yoked to Jesus. Okay.
Yeah.
We're not called to empathy
Right.
in the sense of empathy is the end.
Right.
The end is being yoked to Jesus. So yes, there's time and a place for empathy, but I know that time and place because I'm yoked to Jesus.
Right.
Not because I'm responding to the demands of people.
Right. So good.
So, okay, so where does intercession come in?
Yeah.
So how does this
Right.
all relate? What was I getting after?
Yes.
One of the main things I was talking about in that message is that, so how do we get yoked to Jesus?
Right.
The whole point of the message was we are yoked to Jesus in the place of prayer. Prayer is yoking yourself to the person of God, the
Right.
will of God, and
Yes,
the kingdom of God.
yes.
Okay, so I'm called to that.
Right.
So I want to focus on that, not focus on empathy.
Right.
Because I want to focus on the right thing and the main thing so that when it's time for empathy, I give empathy.
You have it.
And I have it. I have it because it's from him.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm focused on empathy and I'm running around trying to give this thing, A, that I don't have,
Right.
and B, that isn't what God's asking of me right now.
Right.
Because anyways.
No, that's good.
So intercession, the Bible is very clear that I'm called to prayer. I am called to the yoke of Jesus.
Yes.
It's not so explicit about empathy.
Right.
Again, not to say that
Right,
empathy is
it's-
not of God and it's not all that thing. I'm just saying, let's get things ordered rightly.
Right.
Let's start with the first things first.
It's good.
And build up from there. So that was my whole encouragement about intercession, is that is where we are fueled for empathy and with empathy when and where it's needed.
Right.
But so when am I called to empathy? When am I not? I don't know. You've got to walk with Jesus on that. But we are always called to prayer.
Right.
And we are called to intercession. And that's what intercession is it's yoking myself to Jesus and then having him share with me the load that he is carrying
Right.
for this person. And then I partner with him. I'm
That's so
yoked to
good.
him. I'm yoked to his will, and I'm yoked to the kingdom.
Right.
And I'm partnering with him in agreeing with that and for this person.
Yes.
I'm standing in the gap for
Okay.
that. So if you have a pain you're going through, intercession is that powerful place where I'm not just coming straight to you. Jesus is now in the mix here, and
Yeah.
I'm following him. And now he's sharing with me what he's carrying for you because I'm yoked to him.
Wow.
And I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
and so now I'm under the burden.
Right.
But I'm walking with him, and so it's his burden that he's sharing with me.
Yeah, you're carrying it right.
Yeah, and now I'm loving you with the love of God.
Right.
And that's not out of my own strength.
Right.
And so I'm actually flowing now with the living water.
Right.
Which is good.
Right. Yes.
Because that's something worth it that is helpful for you.
Actually.
And that brings life.
Yes.
Because I don't bring life.
Right.
And my empathy doesn't bring life.
Right.
The Spirit of God brings life.
Yes.
So I want to walk with him and intercede with him there. So in intercession, I'm yielded to him, and what burden he gives me, I receive.
Yes.
It's not up to me.
Right.
And also, the burden he doesn't give me, I don't force on myself.
Right.
So this is where now I'm humbly submitted to him in the place of prayer, which is now we're getting into faith.
Yes.
So, okay, Lord, I trust that you know how this needs to go, and so you're sharing with me appropriately and inviting me in appropriately.
Right.
So if there's a burden I think I should be carrying that you're not giving to me to carry, I'm going to trust you with it instead of forcing it upon myself, because what this situation really needs, Lord, is me.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
So I'm joining with him in what he's doing here.
Yes.
And so now I have something to give you.
Right.
And that something is him. I have the life and the love of God to give you.
Yes. So good. Yeah, I mean, and it is painting the picture more clearly that our end goal is to be filled with him. I hear you saying that.
Right.
And like that is what we're going after, and then that's how we actually have something in those moments to give.
Yeah.
And I guess, maybe one more specific question on that is like, okay, so in the intercession, it is about being filled with him, so that whenever there is pain or need around us, we have something to give in those moments. But then it's also when we're presented with those pain and those needs, or the lifelessness, the lack of life that only the Spirit can bring, like you just said, it is then going to him first and praying in that, or it is bringing those things to him and standing in the gap in that way. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, in prayer, again, not just meaning, an hour in the prayer closet.
Right.
Prayer meaning being yoked to the person of God, the will of God, and the kingdom of God.
Okay.
So that's going to happen in the moment.
Even
it's
as you're
not
walking,
like, okay, you're sharing this heavy burden with me. Before I
pray.
say anything, I got to get out of here and go get in the prayer closet. Amen for the prayer closet.
Right.
But we're abiding with him. So I'm
Right.
yoked to him, and now I'm yielded to him. I'm not just responding to what I think is expected of me, and I'm hoping I hit it right in the right spot for you. Like, I want to love you well.
Yes.
I want that.
Yes.
I want to be there for you. I want to be that guy.
Right.
And so but I have to know I can't be that guy without him.
Right.
So it's not like trying to avoid the hard thing in your life. I talked about this in that talk.
In that sermon,
I'm not trying to have the easiest life possible and love you as little as possible.
Right.
I'm actually trying to love you as best as possible.
Yeah. More accurately.
Yeah, accurately, with power and life and all of these things. And I understand that that's Jesus.
Yes.
And so he's going to use me and all these things. So that's why I'm yielded to him. It's like, I want to enter in there with you. I want to be the body of Christ. I want you to encounter Jesus as you encounter me. Like, I want that. And so that's only going to happen if I'm abiding in him, though. It's for sure not going to happen me in my own strength.
Right.
And me just giving you my best shot.
Right.
So that's why it's good to know that empathy isn't the end of all love. It's not the goal all the time of all things for all deal. Like, I mentioned 1 Corinthians 13 and then the fruits of the Spirit. It's like, I can always start there.
Right.
So I don't want us to get immobilized by like, everything is about empathy. That's the whole point that I'm making, is that the world does not revolve around empathy, and love doesn't revolve around empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can always lean in to bearing, through abiding in Jesus, the fruit of the Spirit. Being loved by him and who he really is, so that when somebody needs love, like 1 Corinthians 13 lists it out, I have it to give. I have the patience because I know that he's been patient with me. And I actually have, there's so much more to give people in love than empathy.
Right.
It's not like, oh, well, I can't love anybody who I don't have empathy for. They're not my empathy person, so I guess I can only love my wife. Andrew, is that what you're saying? No. I'm saying there's way more to love
Oh, okay. That's
than
good.
empathy.
Yeah, that's
so
good clarity.
that's how we
Right.
got to complete this whole picture.
Right.
And this is my whole point.
Right.
Is that things have gotten so narrow and focused on empathy that
Yes.
we miss.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot.
Yes.
Like,
Okay.
you get
That's
what I'm
good.
saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm ready to go there. And as I'm
Yes.
trying to figure out if I give you empathy or not, I'm going to give you love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness,
Right.
gentleness, and self-control along the way. And by the
Just
time
to
I'm
name a
done
few.
pouring those
Yeah.
things out on you,
Yes.
maybe I'll be clear about where I
Yeah.
give you empathy or not.
Right.
You know? So
That's good.
yeah.
That's really good. And there's one source for those things.
Amen.
Like you've talked about.
Amen.
And so going to him, being filled to flow.
Yes.
That's awesome. Go listen to that sermon again if you're listening to this. I just encourage you to go listen to that again. Listen to that. It's like the 35-minute mark somewhere in there where you start talking about that. I think that's awesome.